Okay, I think we've got a few people on the attendees list here already, so let's get started and get kick this off. So good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on our data protection is the last line of defense webinar. We're just going to start to present some slides to you and go through what I think is going to be a truly awesome demonstration, and I'm really excited about it. My name is Barry Ward. I'm the Director of Disruptive Technologies here at Wavenet. I'm your host for today. And I'm privileged not only to have a pretty awesome job title, but I get to work with a great team within Wavenet to identify market-leading products and services, and also market-leading vendors as well. So we work with people such as Cisco, HPE, Microsoft, and I'm very pleased to be hosting this session today with Harper and Adam from Redstor. On delivering, and they provide our key data management services, including backup and restore. So I think it's going to be a really exciting event. We've got a great mix of organizations on this call, and thank you all for joining, because I know time is very precious. And what I'm going to do is give a short intro about Wavenet and Redstor, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleagues who are poised and ready to go with what I think is actually going to be a truly eye-opening experience. It's quite scary, because not only we're going to do a normal webinar, these guys are actually going to launch a real ransomware attack. We've got that much faith in the product, and they're going to show how to recover from that using this amazing instant data functionality that they have. So throughout the presentation, we'll be accepting questions in the chat window. There will be time at the end for the Q&A session, and we'll endeavour to get through all the questions. And if there's anything that's particularly pertinent, we will ask those of Harper and Adam as we go along. But if we don't get to any of the questions, we will let you know afterwards if there's any information that you need. So now I'm going to go all Chris Whitty and say, next slide, please. Excellent. So I'm going to deliver a quick introduction about Wavenet. So Wavenet have been delivering cloud services for over 20 years. And our vision as an organization is to be the most respected provider of voice, data, and cloud solutions in the UK. And to do this, we've got a few key values, right? So our key values are trust, easy to do business with, and particularly pertinent today, be a market leader in cloud solutions. And finally, we bring all this together and we make business brilliant. You know, our key is to make your business run and take all the heavy lifting away from you. So if I can go next slide, please. Great. So a bit about Wavenet very quickly. I'm not going to bore you, because this is the kind of stuff that a lot of you may know. Some of you don't know us, so I think it's key. So Wavenet, we're a 60 million sort of turnover organization. You know, why is that key? Well, it means that, you know, we're big enough to have the purchasing power and the services and the support for you as customers, but also we're small enough to have that flexibility and work with, you know, vendors and disruptive technology in the marketplace. We've got about 230 employees in the UK. Nearly half of those are engineers. You know, we are committed to delivering, you know, the great service, and we do that through our engineering resource, our operations team, and also our vendors as well, such as Redstor. And obviously we've got geographically spread across the UK, so we've got 5 offices now in St Albans, Solihull, Chester, Nottingham, and Norwich. I think one of the key things about us as well, and you may have seen on the slide before, we're all about the service and customer satisfaction, and I'm really proud and pleased to say, you know, we've got over 8,000, you know, happy customers here. But actually, our NPS scores and satisfaction scores of 88 and a 5-star Trustpilot rating, you know, are almost unheard of in the industry, and I'm really proud of that. And that comes from our team that we work with, but also the vendors. So the team at Redstor we work very closely with in delivering these market-leading solutions and services. So I suppose, you know, let's get on to the good stuff. Why are we here? You know, and if we look especially at the last year, we had the COVID epidemic, if people aren't aware of that. You know, it's changed the work patterns. People work from home, they're, you know, less secure. We've seen a huge increase in the rise of cybersecurity breaches. So the National Cybersecurity Centre highlighted 400% increase in phishing emails. Bitdefender last year, their mid-year threat landscape identified a 715% year-on-year increase in ransomware attacks. So now, with with the change in the working environments, the move to cloud and increased usage of Office 365 products, and the increase in ransomware, now more than ever is backup and security a real key focus for organizations. Many companies, are taking these services on. They believe that cloud services, Office 365, Microsoft 365 are backed up, but that's a dangerous assumption. And we've seen huge amounts of growth with the Redstor products particularly in that particular area. So what are we going to cover today? So we're going to look at the Redstor product. We're going to look at the instant data features and functionality, and the guys are going to demonstrate what happens in a ransomware attack and how to come back from that attack. As always, we're praying that the demo gods are with us, because otherwise this could be possibly the shortest webinar in the end. As I say, we will be doing the questions as we go along, but I think with that note, let's hand this over to the really clever guys, Harper and Adam, and get this kicked off. So Harper, over to you.
Thank you very much, Barry. Really appreciate that. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us on this joint webinar hosted by Wavenet and Redstor. To introduce, my name's Harper. I'm an account manager. I've been at Redstor for over 8 years. I'm joined by my technical colleague, Adam, who's been working with the software for over 15. As Barry mentioned, before I start, if anyone's got any questions, please don't hesitate to use the chat box on the right hand side of the screen. We'll endeavour to answer any questions as we go along, but if we don't follow up, we'll make sure we follow up with an email. Really, just to touch on a couple of objectives of the presentation today. Really, firstly is discussing the changing risks around data and the changing landscape around data protection. How Redstor, how we can meet that requirement, how we can protect customers and end clients from these risks. But I suppose what everyone's waiting for, the star of the show is over to Adam, is demonstrating really the instant data functionality and how that can assist in a ransomware scenario. We've actually had a couple of customers who have been hit by ransomware in the last 12, 15, 18 months or so. Unfortunately, as you can imagine, no one likes publicising bad news, so we don't have that many case studies, so to say. But actually, we do have a couple where this one particular school, they got hit by a ransomware, I think it was around September, October. It actually encrypted all their on-premise backups. And they were grateful for Redstor being, ultimately their last line of defence. I think it's important to recognise the risk from ransomware presents itself in several different forms, and we're talking around loss of business critical data, the duration of downtime. I always find this statistic very interesting, is good will only last 24 hours before your customers start looking at the competition, and ultimately there's also the reputational damage as well to take into consideration. And there's arguments you can say with regards to, look, a business can ensure that ransomware doesn't infiltrate their systems, and actually Redstor has got inbuilt malware detection features, but I often find once it's happened, it's all about, look, how you react, who can the business rely on. And again, experience has shown me that once you've helped an IT manager in a sticky situation, they often don't forget. They often move on, and when they do move on, they'll remember, wait a second, Redstor were able to help me that one time. Maybe we should put them into the new role, so to say. Next slide, please. So yeah, just to start with some headline information around Redstor. What we do, founded in '98, we provide a next generation cloud data management service that enables our customers to back up, recover, archive and protect Office 365 through a single control center. We're a vendor, we develop the software, we support the infrastructure, we own the support, and yeah, we offer a complete data end-to-end data management experience. We launched the cloud service in 2005 across all our storage platforms. We've got about 7 to 8 petabytes of data globally, and our clients range from top 100 accountancy law firms. We've got half the UK primary schools, public sector, charities, veterinary practices. One of the beautiful things about data is it's industry agnostic. As a business, Redstor, we haven't been standing still. In fact, if we stood still, we would have gone backwards. We've invested significantly in the development and the software, and some of the key features we've developed includes inbuilt disaster recovery. The main challenge with a cloud-based service is you're at the mercy of the bandwidth. And one of the things we developed with instant data is actually getting around that. Look, if you've got a terabyte of data and you need to get it back, realistically over a 100 meg line, you're still talking a week. Whereas if you of that 1 terabyte, you probably only need 10 gig to get your users back. So if we can back up and running, so if we can get the 10 gig to the users so they can get back to work, that cost, that time of downtime, all of that is reduced significantly. That then leads to archiving, the ability to reduce your on-prem footprint. And also lastly, we developed the Office 365 integration. That's definitely been one of the fastest areas of growth over the last 12 to 18 months. And yeah, we tick a lot of boxes with regards to having a single platform for on-prem and your cloud-to-cloud backups as well. Now, again, always conscious that there's a lot of technologies out there, and in the interest of being upfront, we don't proclaim to be the cheapest, but what we always try and play on and what we always try and emphasize is we are more than backup. We provide an end-to-end data management service at a very competitive price point. And where we compete is if our clients are looking for a true cloud-based data management service to add value to their business, if they're looking for a GDPR compliant vendor, and they want to ensure that the data remains, outside of, that remains in the UK, but there's an air gap. There's an air gap. It's not within the network. Now, I just want to start by highlighting some of the alarming statistics that were shared by the National Cybersecurity Centre, just to emphasise the current challenge. 32% of UK businesses have had a security breach or attack in the last 12 months. Only 33% of UK businesses actually have a cybersecurity policy. And actually more specific to COVID, we've seen a 400% increase in phishing emails since the outbreak began 12 months ago. Now, in terms of data, I think the key question to ask is really how safe is your data? Next slide, please. And I think the question is especially key in light of all the changes in user behaviour that's happened in the last 12 months. What are the risks? What are the contributing factors? I'm proud to say, look, the UK, we've responded at a high pace to the need to connect users being forced to work from home. But this leads to challenges associated with the way organisations operate on a daily basis when it really comes to protecting the most valuable asset, their data. So one of the first issues we addressed, that I can't believe it's been 12 months, but yeah, 12 months ago was the restricted access to sites to resolve issues. People all of a sudden had to work from home. Staff in some cases were still required to go on site to manage backup platforms, to change to off-site tapes or drives, and that's where we saw the value of a cloud approach never been more important. We actually had a number of users, prospects, customers through our partners reach out to us because they were seeking a solution with no dependence on local hardware. And just as important was they wanted to have the capability for central management and really the ability to recover from somewhere outside of their organization's network. Now, I'm going back to the point, what are the risks? By not having access to your data or having access through a third cloud platform, it does increase the overhead of supporting an in-house solution. You're also at the mercy of, look, if you don't have access to the data, if the sites are closed, if it's inaccessible, or all the other potential scenarios. Secondly, we've seen a lot more reliance on cloud platforms. And in particular Office 365, which recently, as we've seen, in excess of nearly 258 million monthly active users. Teams, we've seen that go from 32 million 2 years ago to 115 million as of Christmas. 1 in 5 corporate employees use Office 365. It's the most widely used cloud service by user count, by market share. And actually what I find interesting is it's also both most widely used on Windows and Mac. Microsoft have done a really clever one there, being able to take in that Mac market as well. Now, the quote at the bottom of this slide actually sets out Microsoft's position. Microsoft are not responsible for are only responsible for the availability of the platforms they run, but they openly state they are not responsible for the protection and availability of a user's data. Retention policies, they vary from service to service. They can be confusing. Google, they're even less specific on their obligations. Retention policies, they can protect you from some scenarios, but they don't take the place of a third-party backup solution. Now, another risk also worth highlighting is the risk associated with data being created and saved locally. And again, that just creates another potential data silo. I appreciate users are told to save everything on file shares and more so now on things like SharePoint and OneDrive, but We're finding it's essential to have a data management and protection policy that considers every potential location where data could be stored. Next slide, please. Now, I just wanted to touch on Office 365 and really the risks around not protecting data outside of Microsoft. On the right-hand side, we can see demand for Microsoft 365 has increased by approximately 700% since May last year. And actually, what's rather alarming is based on that previous slide's explanation of Microsoft's position, is that over 80% of Office 365 customers do not have a third-party protection solution. And again, to take that into consideration on top of that is Microsoft estimate that 58% of sensitive data stored in the cloud is in Microsoft 365 documents, and again, that's largely unprotected. These statistics really emphasize both how critical the Office 365 platform is, but also how important it is for the business to take ownership and responsibility of protecting the data outside of Microsoft. And as the saying goes, you don't put all your eggs in one basket. Now, next slide, sorry. Now, with all these different considerations and advice, how does Redstor Cloud Solution, how do we provide you with a solution to protect you from ransomware? Firstly, as a cloud-first organization, we provide you with the required firebreak. This is achieved by removing that reliance on primary backup target, and actually, it just means we've had examples where organizations have been hit by ransomware, and it's encrypting their local backup, and I mentioned they contacted Redstor to recover from, and ultimately, yeah, we were their last line of defense. Next slide, please. Now, end-to-end encryption, if you back up ransomware whilst it's idle and prior to executing it, it does become inert in the backup, so it can't propagate in our data centers. And as I mentioned earlier, we've recently implemented malware detection as well within the service. And most importantly, and one of the key strengths within the service, is the instant data capability. When a business is hit by ransomware, the longer it takes to resume operations and pick up where things left off, the more costly the whole incident becomes. With instant data, instead of waiting to recover that 1 terabyte file server, so all the users can have access to all the data, the feature gives them access to the file they need right now, whilst recovering everything else in the background. And it's the equivalent of comparing streaming versus downloading. They don't need the 1 terabyte file server to get back to work. As I mentioned, you only need 10 gig worth of files that you need to work on the project or the task you're working on. We've had several customers being able to build completely fresh environments and restore from Redstor using instant data, and actually providing the ability to prioritize that recovery for the data you require. And as mentioned, Adam is actually going to be able to put that into a live scenario where he's going to be infecting his machine with a ransomware strain, and actually showcasing the instant data capability, being able to recover that data. Now, next slide. Following on from the last slide with regards to how Redstor can help both your business. Sorry, next slide, please. Redstor's really been designed with simplicity in mind. That there's no need for a 2-week training course. We can get customers on a trial backed up within 30 minutes. There's no hardware, there's no lead time. We've got over 40,000 customers across the world, backing up. We've really strong within the accountancy and legal sector. It's very, I think, going on simplicity technically, but also simplicity from a commercial point of view. It's a very transparent pricing model. It's a single price per gig. There's no costs for support, professional services, the number of machines or restores. As I mentioned before, with regards to encryption, all data is encrypted. We use AES 256 and it's built to scale. We've seen customers, I had a customer last year who just wanted to use Redstor to trial their Office 365 backups, realized that we can protect their on-premise machines as well. All of a sudden, the request initially was a 2 terabyte quote. They in the end commenced with consuming based on 7 terabytes. So it is very scalable, but vice versa, we've had some customers who've started with 5 terabytes, decided, look, they've sold off an arm of their business. We don't need to protect those file shares anymore. We only need 3 terabytes now.
Hey, Harper, just had a question come in.
Hi, Barry.
To cut across you. Somebody just asked, how quickly could you recover a full site in the event of a ransomware attack?
Really good question. I think that depends on a couple of things. I think that would depend on bandwidth. If you're talking about Redstor, how quick can we upload your data? But yeah, it depends also on and how much data you require getting back. But we've seen scenarios of customers being up and running within, we're talking hours, so to say. Yeah, so it could take, we're talking within an hour to 6 to 12 hours. But again, there's a lot of parameters to take into consideration. But yeah, I would say anything less than 6 to 12 hours, the business will be up and running, all the data's back. But importantly, I suppose, the better question in some ways would be, how quick can I get my users back to work? And in that case, you're talking with the instant data feature that Adam's going to demo, you're talking in some cases even minutes.
Oh, great, thank you.
And yeah, on that, one of the things I did want to touch was built the elimination of downtime. Full recovery can, in some cases, take days or weeks. With Redstor, you can be up and running within minutes rather than hours. And last thing I want to touch on before I hand it over to Adam was, I often find the importance of the service. It's all great, showing you the console, showing you the features, but I often find what's even more important is the people behind the software. When it hits the fan, can I get someone on the other side of the phone? And actually, we've seen a lot of, actually a recent example from last week. I've got a customer on trial, they're backing up Office 365. They actually thought they backed up a SharePoint folder with us. They can't find it. A user's lost it. They realized they didn't actually select it to back up on our service. They tried to contact Microsoft, and actually that was when their alarm bells were even more so alarmed, so to say, because they realized it took them 2 days just to get any response. And actually we helped them find, right, okay, here's the file, you weren't selecting it to back it up, they've deleted it, this is how you can get it on retention. So yeah, that I often find, look, when it hits the fan, you want to know, when you're speaking to people who are experienced in resolving challenges associated with downtime, who know what they're doing and know how to help your business to get back to operation as soon as possible. But yeah, I'm going to hand over to Adam now to provide a technical overview of the service, demonstrate that instant data feature, and actually showcase a ransomware infection of how the Redstor service can assist in that scenario.
Thanks ever so much, Harpal. You could just mute yourself. That's brilliant. Thank you. So yeah, what I'd like to do is just discuss a high level of how Redstor is implemented across an environment, and then, as Harpal mentioned, what can go wrong, a practical demo restoring over the internet. I say I'm not at a data center or trade show. I'm working from home like a lot of us are. So if I start over here on the right hand side, so Redstor is providing the cloud storage where you're backing up to. And I think it's important to point out, we actually keep 2 copies of your data located within our highly secure data centers. So we always offer a primary and a secondary copy of your data. And just for your notes, our standard retention is 4 months. So straight out of the box, you'll have 4 months worth of history that you can simply recover from. Now, if you have requirements for 12 months or 7 years, that can either be done for one particular system, maybe your finance system, or all of them. So we're incredibly flexible about that. Come and talk to us. And also sovereignty as well. I'm not going to get into the whole Brexit debate, but we speak to engineering companies in Germany having UK data centers now. They say, well, we'd like our data to sit in Europe. So we do have data centers across the globe, as far as North America, Asia Pacific, New Zealand, South Africa, and of course Europe. So we host this storage. It's our Redstor solution that's installed on all of our storage nodes. And as Harpal mentioned, we've got tens of petabytes worth of encrypted, compressed data across our territories and areas. And of course, then from your point of view, which I'll show you in a second, it's all centrally managed from a management console. So reporting on how often backups are taking place, if there's any failures, and to help you start looking to address those issues if you have them. And of course, a typical site for Redstor would have servers, whether they're physical or virtual. Again, we're all home working, and all of a sudden laptop users have gone up a higher priority because we're storing data on our laptops. People never used to really worry about laptops, last year. And then we've got our virtual environments. We're using Hyper-V, VMware. Some people are using other things like Nutanix and maybe Azure or AWS as infrastructure as a service. And we can cater for those environments too. And of course, network shares, network data, where you've just sort of plonked data to save yourself some costs. We can back that up as well. And of course, then, in terms of operating system spread, Windows by far is our bread and butter, but we also have Linux and Mac support. We're fully integrated into Hyper-V and VMware for recovery, as well as Microsoft Azure. We'll come on to that in a little bit more detail as we go. And so what I'm going to start with in a second is I'm going to drop down into what we call our Enterprise Server Edition backup agent. So this is the guy that you install on all of the servers that you wish to protect, whether they're physical or virtual. And it's going to encrypt and stream the data to our primary data center, replicate it over to our secondary data center. So we always have 2 geographical copies. But having said that, if you have an amount of storage on premise, this isn't an appliance. Again, Redstor is software only, so you don't need to buy any expensive hardware and refresh it every 3 to 5 years. But if you want to have a local copy, and it's maybe only one server of all of them, you can also enable that feature within our software. And of course, then finally, as we are really accelerating and using Microsoft Office 365 or even Google Workspace, we've now built our cloud-to-cloud application that backs up and protects those types of environments. So I've got a lot to cover off. I'm not going to be able to cover all of the features, but if I hit escape and get to my desktop, what I'd like to do is start with what we call the Enterprise Server Edition backup client. So again, this is the agent that you'd install across your Windows, Linux, and Mac environments. During the installation of this guy, it's really simple, and you'll be asked to provide an encryption key. And of course, that encryption key is only known to you. It's not known by Redstor, it's not known by Wavenet. So obviously store it and write it down somewhere safe. But once you've installed the backup client, you can then decide on how you want to protect that server. And your options are, the most simple option is to take everything, and that will give you the ability to not only recover that machine back to physical tin, bare metal, or Hyper-V, or VMware, or Azure. And you can do that migration retrospectively as well. And the reason why we can do this is we don't need access to a hypervisor in order to back up as an image level. So that's really key with the Redstor solution. So if you're migrating to Azure and you want to back up infrastructure as a service, they're not going to give you access to the hypervisor. So if I didn't want to back up the entire machine, I can simply turn that off, and then you're in the realms of that folder's important, maybe that one funny files too, maybe that one's not important to you. So you can either decide to be very selective on what you want to include or exclude, or in my case, this system was doing the full system backup. Now, the first question that normally springs to mind there, and I think it was asked earlier, is how long will the backup take? So the very first initial backup will take some time to trickle that data over to Redstor. And there are a number of techniques that we can use to sort of manage that. But once the first backup has taken place, we will do what's called a synthetic full backup forever. And if we drop into my logs, and I don't want to get too technical here, but we'll look at my last backup, which I ran this morning, just checking 9:15 that everything was all working as it should be. My laptop, or the device that you're looking at, could be a server, has got just under a terabyte of storage or data that I'm protecting, so 966 gig. In fact, I've also got over 500,000 files within this device that I'm backing up. And if you look at what was transmitted, it only transmitted 372 meg, and the backup from start to finish took 16 minutes. So please don't think that this cloud service is going to take hours and days each night, clogging up your bandwidth. It's going to identify what has or what hasn't changed and stream that data into the Redstor service. Okay, so let's start with a bit of a disaster.
Adam, can I just jump in? I've got another question for you. So if there was an existing on-site storage, could that be used as a backup target as well?
Yeah, absolutely. But the primary is always to get the data to the Redstor data center. Having a local copy is purely, I've got some storage, I want to utilize it. You can't say, well, I want this just to go to the local storage. It's not as important as other data. So you're either selecting it for backup or not, but you can have a local copy, and you can control the retention policy on that local device as well. So you could have 4 months in Redstor data center. You could just have 7 days worth on the local storage. Hopefully that answers that question. Brilliant. Right, so I'm about to infect my machine with some ransomware. I wish I had a camera or a video going when I asked one of my developers to create me a ransomware virus for some demonstrations. Anyway, so what we'll find is on my my device here, I've got an area called file server. And in that file server area, I've got all sorts of files that I've plonked in there. There's all sorts of things going on in there. So if I minimize the backup client ever so quickly and pull up a standard Windows Explorer, what we're looking at here is my D file server area. And you can notice on the files that have got thumbnails, you can see there's some Word documents and all sorts in here. Right, so we're about to have a pretty bad day, certainly in terms of that folder. So the little scenario I'm going to paint here is, imagine we've all done it. For the technical people that are on this session, you've maybe got an error in the event log. You're looking at what you think is Microsoft sort of TechNet articles, and someone's in there saying, download this disk checker tool, which is just here on my desktop, and run this, and all your problems will go away. And I know I'm as guilty for finding these tools and utilities that lurk around there on the internet. So let's just go and run this tool and see what happens over to my folder in a second. So we're just going to run that. If you keep an eye on over here, all of a sudden you'll probably notice that some of the thumbnails are starting to disappear. And again, really, if I wasn't looking at that folder, I'd be none the wiser. Right, now we have got a problem. So this is what somebody is normally faced when they hit with ransomware. Obviously, this is just a screen grab that's popped up in my browser, but that's alerting me to the fact that I'm now having a very, very bad day. And I'm really, truly reliant on either paying a ransom, and there's no guarantee that going to a website, buying a Bitcoin, sticking in that GUID or that reference number is actually going to provide me with anything or any guarantees that I'm going to get my data back. And of course, I'm not going to pay the ransom, no way. So I'm going to use my backup service, i.e. Redstor, to get that data back. So I'm going to go back to the D drive. Oh, incidentally, let's just go into here and let's just pick one of these files and let's see if I can open it up in... what can I do? Open it up in, well, let's just open it up with Notepad. That should do it. And typical, that's on the other screen. Let me see if I can please bring it back into view. What I'm expecting to see here is basically when the developer wrote this ransomware, he's encrypted everything with Chinese hieroglyphics or characters there. So you can see this is real. There's no way I'm getting that data back without knowing the encryption key. Okay, right. So what I'm going to do first of all, is I'm going to just simply go and delete that folder because it's all encrypted and I don't want that data anymore. It's got no use to me at all. Another interesting fact about ransomware, incidentally, is it often leaves the machine completely functioning. You can reboot the server, the operating system boots up, but the D drive, that file server folder, obviously remains encrypted. And they want the system to still function because they want you to see that banner to actually pay the encryption, the bounty, can't remember the word I was looking for. Right, so let's get that data back. So there's all sorts of different ways. I can't go through each and every single restore with Redstor. There's traditional types of restores. I want to show you the instant data piece because this is really clever. So I'm going to hit instant data. And again, we won't have time to go into all of this in massive details, but if I was restoring the machine as a fully bootable machine, I'd be choosing this option here to recover as a full system. Or I can do temporary access. I'm going to show you this in a second if I've got time. But in this case, I want to permanently restore the data from the Redstor's data center back to my laptop, to my D drive. So I'm going to choose the permanent recovery option. And that's just waiting for that to appear. Here it is on the wrong screen. Right, so let's move that over there. And what I'm going to do is find my Explorer view, and this is where that file server's location was over here. So again, if I pull this little arrow down, this is where I can see the Redstor 4 months worth of retention. So I've got all of the different dates and times, and I can go back in time to restore. And I'm going to plus out my D drive, and I'm going to look for my file server area. And there's all of the files that have recently got encrypted with the ransomware. Right, so what I'm going to then do is drag and drop that from Redstor, and I'm going to drop that over here on my D drive. Hang on a second, I don't want it to go into one of those folders, so let me just go back one. There we go. So I'm going to drag that to my D drive. Okay, so what we should now have is in here, right at the top, is a file server folder. And if we go into that folder, it'll just be quickly working on the thumbnails ever so quickly. And you can see just down at the bottom on my screen, a restore is in progress. And we're only restoring 1.1 gig. It's just great for demonstration purposes. And we're currently done 4% of that restore. And this little bar over here is going to go all the way from left to right, showing the progress of the restore. Now, the interesting thing is if I was now to instruct my users to go and log on to the file server and have a look on the D drive, which was empty a second ago because I deleted that folder. If I look at this Word document and double click on it as a user, all of a sudden, the user's got the file that he was after. Let's go and look for something else. It's got all sorts in here. I don't know what that is. Let's have a look. PDF. All right, a car stereo PDF. Don't ask. Right, what else we got in here? We got my expenses. Let's go and pull one of my expenses files up, and I can get my £94 back. So what you're seeing here is the users are now dictating what gets restored when. So the sequential restore is happening in the background. I'm at 18% of the restore, just hit 19%, but my users are none the wiser that a restore is actually taking place in the background. They can just simply double click on the documents that they want to gain access to, and they can start working on those files immediately. So there's one thing being able to do a restore after you've been hit by ransomware. With Redstor, there's virtually zero recovery time objectives because, you know, this is only a gig of data, but if it was a terabyte of data, we're not having to wait for that full restore to complete before you can get your hands on the data. So I'm going to give you another example of instant data. And this time I'm going to go to the Redstor Management Console. So this is our Windows interface that you would install on the help desk technician, and he can create different groups, like having your virtualization in one folder and your Office 365 in another. And in this case, I've got a Synology NAS that's actually in our Reading office. I haven't been there for a while. And this Synology NAS is currently at 11.6 terabytes. So if I was to just go and drop to my bandwidth calculator and stick in 11 terabytes, and let's just say I had a 100 meg connection to the internet, to get my hands on that data would actually take 1 week, 3 days, 16 hours. So as a quick demonstration, I'm going to go back to the management console, right click on that system that can be remote from me, choose instant data, and this tool will look familiar in a second. This is what we used on my backup agent a second ago. This time I'm going to do temporary access. Windows is asking me what am I up to. And again, before I can do any restore now, I need to know what the encryption key is. So if I type that in, oh, I think I mistyped that. Okay, and I just want to get an Explorer view back over here. So my laptop that you're all looking at has a C drive and a D drive. So in a second, I'm going to present the very last backup as a Z drive over here over the internet. So I'm going to hit mount. And there we go. I've now got a Z drive, and I've now got access to the NAS and all of its data. And in this case, just for a bit of fun, there we go. So it's starting to read into that folder. And if we look down here, you can just see in the background, so far in this demonstration, I've accessed 22 meg. And again, that echoes what Harpal was saying earlier, that the fact that you might have 11 terabytes of data to restore, the likelihood is there's probably 0.1 or 0.5% of data that you need to access immediately. So just for a bit of fun, we'll just quickly stream a video from my backup there.
Hey, Adam, I think you've just answered the question that just came in. So somebody just asked, he said, it looks good, but with ransomware, surely you'd want to restore the whole server rather than just a folder. Much longer time to recover, surely, but this looks really quick.
Yeah, so what I've shown you there, in fact, instant data permanent is still going on in the background if I can find the right little tool to bring up. So that's one restore that is going on at the moment, and that's currently at 70% of restoring that 1.1 gig. The other restore that's going is now the video that I'm streaming from my 11 terabyte backup. Now, one of the things that we would find is if you were doing a full system restore, most engineers, when they build a server, you'll have like, I don't know, 100 gig for the operating system, the C drive, and then you'll have a D or an E or an F drive as the data volume. So to get around that problem, you could restore using our full system restore the C drive, get the server booting up. Maybe it's a domain controller, Active Directory, and you need that in order to allow your users to access the files. And then what you can do is then drag and drop the data for the data disk using the instant data permanent technique. The server's already functioning, users can log in, and they can then start accessing their files on that on-demand basis. So hopefully that answered that question. So that's two restores that we've just looked at. Now, I'm slowly running out of time, but I'd like to also just show you our integration for Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace. So in this case, I'm going to open up a browser, and I'm going to make my way to app.redstor.com. And I'm going to log in with exactly the same user that I was using for the Windows console earlier. And I'll stick in my password. We do have dual factor authentication, but I don't tend to have it on my sort of lab environments. Just another thing for me to have to try and manage during a demo. So let's look at Microsoft 365, and also we've got Google Workspace support. So again, I won't be able to go through all of the functions here, but in order to set the protection of Microsoft 365, it's really, really simple. You would log into here as a new customer, you click on the add button, you'd click on the service that you want to protect, so OneDrive, SharePoint, Exchange, and Teams. And then the last part, you'll be asked to log in with your Microsoft tenant user. And that marries the service all together. That's it. So you can set this up in 4 minutes flat. So very quick example here. So I'm obviously backing up my mailboxes here. My last backup took place already, yesterday at the scheduled backup at 7. I'm selecting all of my mailboxes, but I can obviously go in and fine tune that if there's any users that I don't want to back up and protect. But put it quite simply, if one of my users, let's say Adam, phones up the help desk and says, I've deleted some data, or maybe Adam's been removed from Office 365, there's a number of different restores that I can achieve with Redstor. So if I choose Adam right at the very top level, I can see that the backup was successful. I can then go back in time, the 4 months, which is our default retention. And then down at the bottom here, I can either restore that user's email as a PST file, or I can restore it back to that user's Outlook. So in that case, that would be quite a lot of data. So maybe I'd be better of talking to the user and saying, well, if you can help me identify, well, we had the data on the 14th of March and it was in my mailbox, and maybe it was in my inbox, and maybe we'll look between the 1st and the 4th of March, and then the help desk guy will be able to see who the emails were from, a brief summary of the subject line, and whether an attachment exists. So they'll be able to help with the user, identify the files that need to be recovered. And again, they can either choose to recover those 4 files as a PST file or recover them back to the individual's Outlook. So it's completely seamless for the users. It's all centrally managed, and it's really easy to operate.
Adam, can I just ask a couple more questions that have just come in quickly while
Yeah,
we're
of course you
flowing? So somebody said instant data clearly helps a lot, but is the time to complete a full restore just limited by the connectivity bandwidth?
Yeah, so with the full system restore, you obviously need to get all of the components that you need in order to boot up a server. So really what you're looking at is the size of the C drive. In fact, if we're okay just for 30 seconds, let me just connect into a little different area that I manage, and I can explain this very quickly. So if I go into my servers group, and there's one of my test systems, I can see it's got full system recovery enabled, and I can see that the entire backup was in this case 65 gig. So if I was to right click on that machine, run instant data, and this time I'm going to do the full system restore, and you can see there's various restores and other activity going on in my little environment. And before I can do the restore, I need to stick in the encryption key, which will take me on to the next part of the process where I can put the server back to a particular date and time. I can choose the hypervisor target, so whether I'm recovering via VMware, back to Azure or bare metal. In this case, I'm going to do a virtual disk, so I'm going to dump it in a folder called admin data center. Right, so this is where I wanted to get to. So you can actually choose what volume you restore as part of the full system restore. So if I hit next, what this will then do is give me the ability to, there's disk 1, there's the boot partition, disk 2, which is the C drive. Now, the partition is 126 gig, but the amount of data that I'd actually be restoring is 57 gig. So in this case, if I knew that the L drive, and I know it's only 6 gig in this example, but if that was 6 terabytes, that's going to slow down the time it's going to take to get the operating system functioning. So what you would use is a combination of restoring disk 1 with its as a bootable virtual disk, and then what you can do is once you've kicked off the restore, so I'll leave that running over there, you'll see there it is there. You'll see the restore taking place for the full system restore. So didn't bank on doing this one today, but really good question. Yeah, so that's going to come down from experience. 57 gig, I'd normally expect that to take around about 25 minutes to restore. At the moment, it's saying 37 minutes, which I'm happy with that. I'm also streaming this webinar to all of you, and I've got the 11 terabytes restore still going, and I've also got the other instant data restore permanent. So a lot going on my bandwidth. But yeah, so in this case, 45 minutes or 30 odd minutes for the operating system, and then I can use the instant data permanent technique to migrate the data disk to that server once it's up and running. So hopefully I answered those questions for you.
Now I've got you answering questions. I've got another 2 that have come in actually that are actually quite similar. So I'm going to bounce those to you as well.
Okay.
So somebody's asked what happens when there's delayed activation of ransomware, but also what happens when there is delayed activation of the ransomware and the backups have been taking in the virus.
Okay, so we're slightly stealing a bit of thunder from our webinars that are released tomorrow. So I don't know how much I should go into the detail here, but again, I'm not going to go into massive detail, but one of the things that Harper also mentioned is that we are now offering an option to scan your backups to see whether you're infected with malware. So if you're looking at this web dashboard, you'll see that in my environment, I've got 435 nasty things that I put there on purpose. So I think to answer this question is, you're right. You know, somebody can back up a virus and send that into the Redstor environment. Of course, it's all encrypted. Now, again, massive topic about key exchange and how we're able to add access and scan the data. But as an option, if you feel that you're vulnerable and you want to have your backups regularly scanned, that is a service that, as from tomorrow, we're offering. So that what that will also mean that when you're doing a restore, if a suspicious file has been detected, you actually need to go into our portal and choose whether you're going to mark that as safe or you're going to delete that from your backup. So again, probably stealing a bit of the thunder for tomorrow's release at Redstor, but really good question. I hope that helped answer that.
Great. And while we're on Office 365 stuff, I've got a couple of quick questions there because I'm conscious of time and I keep interrupting your flow. So apologies.
No, yeah, it's all good.
So somebody's asked what's how much retention can Redstor set for back in the 365 data? And also, if they want to protect multiple areas, do you need to onboard them separately, sort of toggle between the ad, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think so. So if I go back to here, you'll see that I've got Mail, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. And again, it's a process that you do 4 times. It only takes about a minute to set up each one of these components, and then that's it. They'll be backing up and going on their schedule as often as you set one up. In terms of the retention, so again, our standard retention is 4 months. But should you need something else, you're able to go into one of the groups. So let's go into my Office 365. Let's go into my mailbox, and then over here, I can then choose how many roll-ups. So if I wanted a year's worth, like what I've got set in my environment at the moment, I'll retain a year's worth of recovery points. So hopefully that answered the question. It's really flexible. It's really easy to choose different retentions for different areas within your Redstor deployment. Any other questions, Barry, that I can help with?
There's only one more. It says if you do the scanning that you were talking about there and the backup, will it take longer to back up?
No. So so again, getting in the realms of how does it do what it does, but if you imagine when the backup runs, it already records what's called the MD5 hash of the files that you're protecting. What we then do is we do a scan of those hashes, and then we have artificial intelligence that will then say, well, that hash, we've seen that in other cases where it could be a virus. So then when a key exchange that takes place after every backup, regardless, because it needs to encrypt the data, that's when it can then go on and do a more in-depth scan. So again, it's not going to affect the backup performance. It's all back-end processing that we're performing in our data centers. We've got massive amounts of storage, and we also have massive amounts of computing power. So again, we're utilizing that with our anti-malware service.
Cool. And one final one that's come in from James. Do you offer backup for G Suite yet?
Yes, we do. So G Suite decided to call it Google Workspace. So again, I've got that configured. It's configured in exactly the same manner. You'll see I've got my Google Gmail. And again, just like I showed you earlier, as a user, you can drill into a date and time and then drill into that user's inbox to do restores. And that's the same for Google Drive. And we also, if there are any schools on this session, we also support Google Classroom, which is the classroom element that Google have developed.
Great, thank you.
Fantastic.
I've got no more questions at the moment.
Brilliant. Well, I hope that demonstration was interesting for all of you, and you'll probably see I've got my demo slide and then I've got the questions and answers slide. So unless there's any other questions that anybody would like, what I would say is, if you want to have a private discussion, then, there we go. Please contact the team at Wavenet, and they'll be happy to either have some in-depth personal discussions, or even get myself or Harpal on a session. So I think I'm handing back to Barry now.
Yeah, I think I mean that was awesome, Adam and Harpal. I thought that was brilliant, and you know, seeing a ransomware live is not something you ever really want to go through.
No.
And then actually having the confidence to do it and restore, I think was really, really powerful. And I think one of the takeaways I certainly take away from this is, you know, the backup and the ransomware protection, stuff like that, is part of a managed solution, right? It's not the whole, it's part of a security solution, and that's kind of the stuff that Wavenet can bring to the customers as well. We can wrap it all together. We can do the connectivity, we can do virtual compute, our IT as a service, and we partner with partners like you because you've got that expertise in this particular area. And I think that's key in terms of building that all together. You know, we can't treat these as isolated items. We want to bring that service up and running. But I think the demonstration was really powerful, and I hope everybody on the webinar thought that was of use. As Adam said, you know, if you want to get hold of us, we've got the sales@wavenetuk.com email address, or give us a call. If you want to reach out to myself as well, I'm barry.ward@wavenetuk.com. If you want to talk about anything disruptive, and we will be taking any other questions that you've got at the end, and sending those out that we haven't answered. So I think that is 2 minutes to go before the session ends. So if there are no more questions, one more question finally. So before we leave, are there any ingress charges to use the services?
Oh, that's a really good question. So the simple answer is no. When you back up to Redstor, yes, we've got our data, and again, I'll let Wavenet go through the actual commercial aspect, but typically it's a price per gig of how much data you're storing with us. So the short answer is you can restore as often as you like. There are no charges of getting your data out of our service. So if you just want to do a check on a weekly data basis to check that instant data temporary and have a browse around and pick a few files at random, or if you want to restore entire machines into Azure, there are no egress charges at all from Redstor.
That's great. No, that's fantastic. And again, that's another one of the real value adds we think that we get from working with you guys on delivering that solution. So I'm not going to ask any more questions. I think I've interrupted you guys enough today, but I think that was absolutely amazing, and I hope a lot of the people watching got some good stuff out of it. I look forward to speaking to people individually, and yeah, thanks very much, guys, at Redstor, and speak to you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Barry.
so much.
Really appreciate it. Thanks
Cheers,
a lot.
everybody.
Cheers.